We're now going to talk about Excel controls. So Excel has two different types of controls, and you can get to them using the Insert drop-down box from on the Developer tab. Now you see here there's two types of controls. We see Form Controls and Activex Controls, and you may be wondering which is better. You may have heard Activex is better. In this course, we are always going to prefer Form Controls. So Form Controls are very lightweight, and they allow you to create cell relationships. Now, you may not know what I'm talking about just yet, but that cell relationship is the key to a lot of what we've been describing so far in our Excel development. So it allows us to directly interface with Excel cells, and you'll see what I mean when we get to that. Activex Controls, on the other hand, are for very VBA-heavy applications. Well, at least that's what we've been told. And the reason we've been told that is because they allow you to do things like double click, right click, shift click, left click. With that, however, is a lot more weight. So yes, they have more options, and yes, they interact with VBA really well, but there's also a lot more weight to them. And by weight, I mean they take up a lot more spreadsheet storage and memory, and also kind of a weird thing about them, and I don't think it used to be this way in 2003 and 7, but as time goes on, they get a lot buggier. There are some ActiveX controls you'll put on a spreadsheet and they'll move around spontaneously. They don't always look the same across other spreadsheets. There's a lot going on that makes them very buggy, so we won't even use them here. And in fact, as this is a no VBA course and we want to show you what we can do without VBA, we're only going to use form controls. So we're always going to look to this top one. We will not look to ActiveX controls in this course. And the good news is you don't need them. They're harder to work with. For our cases, we have everything we need with form controls. Now, there's several different types of form controls. Button allows you to click on it, and it will fire a macro. We're going to typically prefer shape to that, so we won't really be using button here. Combo box allows you to pick from a selected list, also very similar to the list box. Checkbox allows you to check on and off, and you can connect that to a cell, which will reflect true or false. A spinner will allow you to go up and down in a value. Again, you can connect that to a cell to make it go up and down. A list box, very similar to combo box. Combo box lets you pull from a drop-down. List box has the list set already showing. Option button allows you to select from mutually exclusive possibilities, and again, you can link those to a spreadsheet. So let's say you select the third option, a cell will reflect a 3. A group box allows you to house those option buttons. We won't really be using group box. Some say it's useful. I don't find it particularly useful. I think its aesthetic is very old, so I won't prefer it. Label will allow you to put a label. Text box already allows you to do that in Excel, so we're going to prefer the text box shape always, because label is actually very restrictive about what it can do, and the best thing I think you can use it for is to maybe hook a macro to it, but you can do that with a text box, so we'll always prefer text box in this case. And finally, one of my favorites, the scroll bar. So the scroll bar can go horizontal or vertical, and you can link it to a cell, so as you move that scroll bar up and down, the cell will also reflect that accordingly. Now in this course, we are only going to be talking about these 5. The reason I picked these 5 is that I think they're the most useful. So some of these overlap each other in functionality, so you don't need a specific one. So we can get by using certain ones and not others. I think we should. So these are the 5 that I'm going to talk about. I do encourage you to go look at the others on your own. Those others are the group box, the label, and the button. So I don't really have a whole lot of uses for them. I don't think they're particularly useful anymore, but they may be worth investigating on your own. In this demo, we're going to talk about the combo box, list box, scroll bar, spinner, and checkbox controls. Now, to insert a new control, what you'll do is you'll go to the Developer tab, and then here you have this toolbox that's under this Controls group. So I'm going to click the down arrow here, and you see it brings up the form controls and the ActiveX controls. And as I said, we're only going to be dealing with these top ones and not these bottom ones. Now what these are going to allow you to do is take controls and put them onto your spreadsheet. So watch what happens. I know we're on the combo box, but just as a demo, I'm going to show you, I'm going to put a scroll bar here, and you see I can put it on the spreadsheet. So I'm going to hit delete real quick on that. Now when I hit this drop down here, you see that some of these are grayed out. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of Excel trivia on why these are grayed out. So these form controls belong to an old form control system that Excel used to use. So if you've done some VBA and you've done some user forms, you know that ActiveX controls go on the user form. So these form controls go on that old form control. And the reason these are grayed out is because they're only enabled when you're using an older form control. So I'm just going to show you that real quick. I'll right click here. I'm going to go to Insert, and you don't have to do this on your side, just to give you some context, you see that it brought up this insert dialog box. Over here we have MS Excel 5.0 dialog. You may have been wondering, what is that even used for? So I'll click that, I'll hit OK. So these are the old style of dialog boxes. Now we use user forms, but this was kind of the old way of doing it. And you'd go here and you could put the form controls directly on here. And then if you wanted to run it, you would do something like run dialog, and you see it created a dialog. So just some Excel trivia for you. Okay, so now we're back at the form controls demo. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to insert a combo box. So I'll hit this drop down. We see the combo box is the second one in. I'll click this. Now what happens is you click the control and then you go down the spreadsheet. You can either click on the spreadsheet, or if you hold your mouse and drag out, you can sort of draw it. Okay, so I've drawn the drop down control. You can see there's nothing in it right now. So how do we populate the values in this? So what I can do is I can right click, I can go to Format Control, and you see it brings up the Format Control dialog box. Alternatively, if you're not a big fan of right clicking, what you can do is you can just click this Properties button from under the Developer tab with the control selected. So I'm going to click Properties here, and now you see that it's asking for two different items. So under this Format Control dialog box, we have Input Range and Cell Link. Whenever you have these little icons here, that means Excel says it's willing to connect to the spreadsheet to find this information and display it. So the first thing I'd like to do is put in the list that we want to pull from. Well, we have a list right here, A4 through A8. I'll select that right there. And then under the cell link, I can hook to a cell that's going to give me an index of the item I've selected. So the cell link right here, I have already kind of given us a place to put it, so I'll click B1. Make sure that it's selected right there, and then I'll hit OK. Okay, so now watch what happens. So when I click this dropdown, we can see that the list that we've selected has now been populated into the dropdown. Now watch what happens. I'll select Excel. You see that now the index of the item I selected was 1. If I select Word, it's 2. If I select Publisher, it's 3. If I select Project, it's 4, and so on. Now, what can I do with this information? Well, if I know that the 5th item is selected, I can use an index to figure out what that is, and I can use it for later. More to the point, what I can also do is if I don't really like the placement of this, I can hold Control and I can select the control. So you hold Control on the keyboard and then select the Excel control you're interested in, and this will allow me to move it around. Now, I want to show you one last thing before we move on, because there's a shorthand way to do some of this. Notice that my cell link, if I click on this control, it says B1 up here, which is this item right here. So if I wanted to change this real quick, I could put a B2 in here, I could put a B3. Now in this case of the dropdown, since I have 2 input items, it's not as easy to use. But in other instances, as we'll see in this course, it's actually very easy to switch the links. Now let's talk about ListBox. ListBox works just about the same way. So I'm going to select ListBox, that's this one right here. And you can see I've drawn it out. I'm going to go click this Properties button right here from on the Developer tab with the control selected. And we see we have an input range. So I'm going to select that. So you can see we have several options here. Single allows you to select one single item. Multi allows you to select multiple items in a contiguous range. So that means the multiple ones you select all must be touching each other. And then finally, Extend allows you to select multiple ones from non-contiguous ranges. So in this case, I generally only suggest using ListBox for a single. I would not suggest using it for any of these others. These other options kind of get a little more complicated when working with the spreadsheet, and I also just don't think list boxes are the good place for them. So I'll hit OK here, and you can see what has happened is that my list box has now been populated with the items. And as I select each one, let me click off of that real quick. So when my mouse goes over and you can see the finger like that, that means it's in selection mode. So when I select each different one, as I'm doing here, you notice that the index updates, and then you can use that item to actually figure out what's been selected and go from there. Now we're going to talk about one of my favorites, the scroll bar. Actually, this is probably my most favorite. So what I'm going to do here is I've clicked Insert, and I've clicked the scroll bar, and you can see it's put this little crosshair up. So if I draw the scroll bar down, but skinny, you see that it's going to be a vertical scroll bar. Now, if on the other hand, I go back to Insert, and I grab that scroll bar again, if you see that I draw the scroll bar wide and short, you see it goes horizontal. So you can actually choose whichever one you want. So I'm going to click on this one. I'll hit Control click because I'm going to delete it right now because we'll use this one for this. Now what I want to show you here is that the scroll bar already allows us to sort of move up and down. But what we can do is we can make that connection with the spreadsheet. So here's the shorthand way of doing it. I'll hold Control, I'll click the scroll bar, and now I can click into this formula bar here. You can see that the cursor has come up. And I can type in equals, and I can select B1 like I'm doing right there. I'll hit Enter, I'll click off. You can see a 10 is populated in here. As I scroll this up and down, it moves accordingly. So this is something that we're actually going to use in the demo. Now, not to be outdone, I will right click. Now remember, you can also go to Properties, but I'm just going to show you the different ways of doing it. We'll right click here, go to Format Control, and now we see that scroll bar actually has a lot of properties to it. So it has a current value. That current value is dictated by the cell link. It has a minimum value, so you can set a minimum value in here. It has a maximum value, you can set that as well, and it also has an incremental change that dictates how much it can go up and down when you interact with the scroll bar, and it also has a page change, and that's if you click above or below the middle paddle, that's how much it's going to change. So I don't usually mess with page change or incremental change. Minimum and maximum value are ones that are important to what we're going to do later. Now notice, none of these values, unfortunately, you can set on the spreadsheet. So you can only set the one that's a cell link, and the cell link is directly related to the current value. So notice as I drag up and down, it changes. And then one other thing to notice is if I go here to cell B1, and let's say I type in 50, it's going to change the scroll bar automatically. So that's something that's very cool. The next item is the spinner control. So I'm going to go to Insert. Here's the spinner right here, fourth item in. So this one is similar to the scroll bar. I'll right click. I'm going to click into this formula bar. I'll select cell value B1. Oops, I forgot to hit equals. That's what happens if you don't hit equals. So I'll hit equals, cell B1, enter. And you can see that the value is related. And what this is kind of neat for is if you have kind of a big cell, you can sort of shrink it and put it in the cell and then make that value go up and down accordingly. So there's kind of an aesthetic value to it. Now the other thing about the spinner is that if you hold Control and you go to Properties, it has very similar properties to the scroll bar. Now finally, the last one I'm going to show you is the checkbox. So what I'll do here is I'll go to the Insert from on the Developer tab, and you see this checkbox, it's the third one in. I'm going to grab it, and I'm just going to draw it out. So the checkbox allows us to have a true or false value on the spreadsheet. And we know that trues and falses are ones and zeros, so we're actually going to use this checkbox later to its fullest effect. So what I can do here is first, I can wait till my mouse becomes a cursor above the lettering, and then I can click in, and this will allow me to change the text that's inside. So I've changed it to toggle me. So what I can do here is I can hold Control and click, and I'll go to Properties. It's going to bring up that Format Control dialog box, and you can see that it actually has multiple values that I can pull from. So first I'm going to set the cell link. We're going to make that a B1. I'll hit Enter here. Notice that now that this is selected up in the formula bar, it says equals B1, so this is part of the dynamic that we're working with. So here I'll click Toggle Me, and you can see this goes to true and false. Now there's actually a third state that is available. So if true is checked and false is unchecked, if I go here and I generate an NA error, we see it actually takes on a mixed state. So this is kind of interesting. Don't have a whole lot of use for that, but something to keep in mind. It's not something, however, that can be fully toggled between on and off. So if I click on this, it goes away from the mixed state.